Not too long ago, I uploaded a video to this channel called The Beatles vs. Elvis Presley, and let's just say that a lot of you guys didn't agree with me. Many of you were saying that it wasn't fair on Elvis because we're talking about a solo artist against a full band, out of which two of the band members are considered to be the greatest artists of all time, being John Lennon and Paul McCartney. However, I did explain on the video that taking John Lennon or Paul McCartney or both and facing them off against Elvis wouldn't really be that interesting because it would be incredibly one-sided. Elvis is one of the greatest, best-selling, most critically acclaimed artists of all time, and when it comes to Paul McCartney and John Lennon, yes, they were really popular and really influential too, but their solo careers are not as impressive as their work with the Beatles. So I didn't think it was going to be an interesting video. However, a lot of you thought that it would be a good idea, which is the reason why I bring you this video. Now, this is not going to be an old-fashioned versus episode. If you've seen any other episodes on this channel, you know that I usually take on 4 categories, which is popularity, influence, performance, and discography, and based on the results in each category, I pick a winner at the end of the video. However, because this is such a weird matchup, I'm gonna tell you right away, Elvis wins in every single one of these categories. You know, it's kind of pointless to continue the video because I already said my opinion on the whole thing. Well, no, because I thought that instead of matching them up in every category, maybe it would be a better idea to explain why Elvis wins in every single one of these categories, even if you take both John and Paul's discographies combined. Before we go any further, let me remind you guys, this is only my personal opinion, so if you have your own, and I'm pretty sure you do, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments, and I'll make sure to check it out and give you my opinion on your opinion. Without further ado, let's go on with the first category, which will be popularity. Now, if you saw my other video, The Beatles versus Elvis Presley, you know that I gave a really controversial opinion when it comes to the level of popularity of the Beatles compared to that of Elvis. In my opinion, Beatlemania is the single greatest and most insane musical phenomenon of all time. I don't think anyone can go over what the Beatles did with Beatlemania in 1964 and 1965. Therefore, I gave the point to the Beatles when it comes to popularity. However, when it comes to Paul and John, even though they were really popular in the 70s and their solo careers were really successful too, I can't really compare that, even in the slightest, to that of Elvis. Like, he is one of the most popular human beings in the history of humanity. The level of popularity that Elvis enjoyed, especially in the US, was so crazy that the only other music phenomenon that can compete with them is the Beatles and Michael Jackson. There's no other discussion to be made, even if you take Taylor Swift, Drake, any of these new, modern age artists that are really popular too. Even if you think that these artists today are really popular with social media and all these different tools they have, is nothing compared to what it was back then with Elvis. The fact that he had rock and roll music as his main genre, which was largely considered as a black genre back in a really racist America, influenced the level of popularity that he had in the general public, not only adults but also young people that saw a rebellious atmosphere surrounding Elvis in every single one of his performances, while the older, more old-fashioned audiences had songs like Can't Help Falling in Love, It's Now or Never, Love You, Return to Sender, Love Me Tender. Like, he had something for everybody, and that is one of the main reasons why he was so popular. Being the best-selling artist of all time with 1.6 billion records sold. I don't really know if that's precise. Some people say it's more, some people say it's less. It's definitely over the billion, so that's just a testament of his popularity. And when it comes to John and Paul, yes, they were really popular too. They sold a lot of records, especially when it comes to Paul with his Wings albums and his solo material as well, his albums with Linda. And John, when it comes to the political side of his popularity, he maybe was at the same level of Elvis when it comes to influence on the American audience. But once you put every other factor like music and acting performances as well, Elvis just goes to a different level, and yeah, you gotta give this point to Elvis. Now let's go with influence. And Paul may not really be in the discussion. Obviously, Elvis was way more influential than Paul McCartney. However, John, it's a way more interesting conversation, especially if you take into consideration his contributions to the psychedelic movement, to heavy rock music, like with Your Blues, for example. Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey. Then you go to his incredibly influential Plastic Ono Band album that showed artists a different way of performing, more raw and emotional. You could also add the fact of all the politics he included in his music, which was not seen so often at the time, outside of the folk movement, that is, But even with all these different things, you can't really say that John Lennon was more influential than Elvis Presley, because Elvis Presley adopted rock and roll music. Prior to Elvis, rock and roll music was seen as a black genre, and because we're talking about the 50s here, America was still really racist. racist. If you think it's racist today, you should have seen it back then. So even though a lot of people enjoyed rock and roll music, it wasn't that okay or that accepted to enjoy it. You know, when Elvis adopted it, gave it a little twist, and making the structure of rock and roll a little softer, a little more on the melodic side, everyone started to listen to the genre, and everyone accepted it as the genre of the moment and brought it to the mainstream, basically, or what was considered the mainstream at the time. This resulted in all the different branches of rock and roll music and rock overall that came out in the 60s. You know, the 60s is the most revolutionary time in music history. So many different genres, so many different movements came out in the 60s, and the reason for that, or the first time we saw this rebirth in music, was Elvis with his first couple of albums. And yes, John and Paul were really influential too on their own solo discographies, but none of their contributions comes close to being as important as the one Elvis made with rock and roll. So that is the reason why I'm giving the point to Elvis in this category as well. Now let's go with performance. And do I really need to explain myself here? Yes, I love Paul McCartney. He's one of my favorite performers of all time. I think that his technical ability at the time of performing the tracks is bigger even than that of Elvis. And when it comes to John Lennon, I do believe that he is extremely influential, especially with the release of albums like Plastic Ono Band that showed people a different way to perform music. It still sounds beautiful, it's still really pretty, but it's more emotional than usual, and it's pretty unique. No other artist had managed to give me the same feeling as John Lennon when it comes to his performing style. However, we're talking about Elvis here, and Elvis on a good day is one of the greatest performers of all time. First of all, I gotta let you guys know that when I'm talking about performance here, I'm talking about the overall feeling and energy of the performance. I'm not only talking about technical ability. I think it's important, obviously, to perform a track properly, but I don't think it's the entire thing. I don't think that if you have technical ability, you have the back sold. Like, not at all, actually. There's a lot of artists that have great technical ability, but lack the emotion and passion to sing the songs. Therefore, it sounds flat and bland to me, and I don't really enjoy their performances. But Elvis had it all. He has technical ability. He has the ability to, communicate all this energy and ecstasy in his music that makes you want to listen to more. His live performances are often more entertaining than his studio version, and when it comes to the studio version, especially if you go to the balladry and gospel era of his career, you can hear an insane amount of passion and emotion behind every note. He's definitely in my top 5 greatest performers of all time, and not only the performance, but also how entertaining he was on stage. When you listen to his cover of songs like Yesterday, Something, or My Way by Frank Sinatra, the American Trilogy, If I Can Dream, his voice wasn't always that great, or it didn't always sounded that great, but it was the energy and passion. And I know I said the word passion so many times in this video, but that's just how you would describe his performance style. He was in the track. You can tell he was feeling it. You can tell that he loved performing. And, if you want any more proof, you can listen to If I Can Dream on his NBC special, Heartbreak Hotel and Are You Lonesome Tonight, Can't Help Falling in Love, all of these on the 68 Comeback special as well. He managed to adapt his, performance style to a lot of different genres like blues, folk music, country, gospel, and rock and roll. And that, is just a testament of his incredible versatility and love for music, which is the reason why even if Paul has almost perfect technical ability, and John was extremely influential to show people a different way of performing songs, I have to give the point to Elvis. Now let's go with discography, and y'all know that for me this is the most important category, so let's see how this plays out. I know that I said in the previous video I made about Elvis, the Beatles versus Elvis video, that his discography is incredibly messy. It's a marketing move rather than an actual discography. There's a lot of compilations, a bunch of recycled material, a bunch of albums that are really not that great, especially, you find those in a lot of the soundtracks he made in the mid-60s where he had his Hollywood era. And when you go to John and Paul's side, you do have very solid discographies: Imagine, Double Fantasy, Plastic Ono Band on John's side, and then you have Ram, Band on the Run, and McCartney 1 on Paul's side. So who's the winner in this category? Well, even if his discography is a mess, you kind of have to give Elvis a point on this one, especially if you go to the 50s. His album search is more important overall, with records like The Sun Session, his self-titled 1956 releases, both of them from Elvis in Memphis. So many good albums. And when it comes to John and Paul, yes, you do have great records too, like the one I mentioned before, but you also have things like Walls and Bridges and Wings at the Speed of Sound, albums that are not that good either. So it's not like both John and Paul's discographies are well organized or really consistent, like not at all. Most of their best albums were released really early in the 70s, so I guess you could argue that after Band on the Run and after Imagine, both John and Paul never really did anything of the same quality. quality, so you could say that their discography is also a mess. So after all is said and done, I guess you could argue that all three of these discographies were incredibly inconsistent when it comes to the quality of the releases, so you kind of just have to base it off of the best albums of each discography, and if you do that, I think that Elvis had a much more impactful and important discography, and for that reason, I'm gonna give him the point. See guys, I told you, this video was just me glazing Elvis for 15 minutes, 17 minutes straight probably, because in my opinion, out of the three, he is the greatest one, by a country mile as well, especially when it comes to popularity, especially when it comes to performance. Maybe influence in the discography was a little tight, but he is still the winner. And a lot of people were saying that I had a Beatle bias in my previous video, and I understand why people say that, and maybe that's the truth. You know, the Beatles are my favorite artists of all time. However, if we take John and Paul as solo artists, they don't even stand a chance against Elvis. He's one of the greatest performers of all time, one of the most popular human beings in history, one of the most impactful and influential humans to ever live as well, and also he has a really good discography with amazing albums that had great impact too. Even if it's a little messy, it's the only like weak point in his career, you know, the fact that his discography was sort of like a marketing move basically. He is still one of the greatest of all time, and he's definitely better than John and Paul. However, this is only my personal opinion. If you have your own, as I said in the beginning of the video, and I'm pretty sure you do, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments, and I'll make sure to check it out and give you my opinion on your opinion, so we can have a small conversation in the comment section. I love Paul McCartney. Actually, if this was a question or whether or not Paul McCartney is my favorite over Elvis, I would say definitely yes. I love Paul McCartney's music, I love his discography, but even I can admit that he doesn't have the most prolific discography ever. He is not the most prolific singer ever. He wasn't that influential when you compare it to Elvis. So yes, I love Paul McCartney and I love John Lennon, but if we're being honest here, I think this wasn't even a competition from the very beginning, which is the reason why I didn't really want to make this video in the first place. I just didn't think it was a great idea, but honestly, I had a lot of fun making this video, and I really hope you guys had fun as well. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. If you want me to check out an artist, a song, or an album, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments, and I'll make sure to check it out and fulfill your request as soon as I can. Once again, guys, I hope that you had fun today, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.